Welcome to another Dragonlance Saga review episode. It is Mahjong Pell's Wealth the 6th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my non-spoiler review of Dragons of Eternity by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. Now, this just was released today. Some people got a copy if they went to Gen Con early. I just grabbed the audiobook, went through it, and now I want to share some of my non-spoiler thoughts with all of you. So it is going to be a little bit different than my traditional reviews, and I am going to give a spoiler-filled review next week. I want to give everyone a chance to read the book before I spoil everything for everyone. But I do have thoughts, and I think for people who are not sure whether or not they want to go into a book, especially a new Dragonlance book, because let's be honest, it's been a while, outside of this trilogy, that is, then maybe they want to know if it lands the way it should. Or maybe they read the first two and they're a little disillusioned because, let's be honest, there was a lot of weird stuff that happened in the last book. They want to know if this is worth the read. That's where I come in. All right. I actually don't need this. Hey, Dina. Or Dina? Good to see you. All right. I don't need these because I'm not actually reading my review. Before I get into the spoiler-free discussion, however, I do want to say that this is just my opinion. If yours differs from mine, that's all right. I dig it. That's okay. Share your thoughts in the live chat if you're watching this live, or if you're watching this after the fact, throw up your message in the comment and we'll get to it. I do have a mail time episode coming. The book is supposed to be delivered here today in like very few minutes. So I will have an unboxing video coming out for that. But before we get into it again, I do want to mention that this is the 40th anniversary. This year is the 40th anniversary of Dragonlance, its birth. How it squoze out of the TSR womb into all of our laps that we, weird analogy, that we all love, right? We all love Dragonlance. Well, I do anyway. That being said, if you want to contribute to what I am holding as a celebration of 40 years of Dragonlance by sharing a picture you wrote or maybe a few words about why you love Dragonlance or has it impacted your life, or if you have a video or a sound bite that you want to record and send to me, either the raw video file or a link to your channel or your podcast or something, feel free. Shoot it over info@dlsaga.com. I'll add you in. I already have a bunch of people who've made submissions. I'm waiting for some more to come through. So I would love to add your 40th anniversary contribution to this celebration as well. So you can send any information or inquiries or anything to info@dlsaga.com or just hit the website dlsaga.com for more information there. All right. So let's say hi. I do need these to read this. Rhiannon, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in live. Good to see you. Nuka Bat, how are you? Thanks for tuning in. Giggles the Clown, your name terrifies me still, but great to see you joining in chat. From what you listened to on Audible today, started this morning, it's pretty good. This is like a straight up, I really dug this novel. It has faults, in my opinion, but I think it's the best of all of them for some pretty obvious reasons that I can't really get into specifics, but generically I'll address here in just a sec. You always go back to Chronicles and Legends, the campaign setting constantly. I am the same way, and maybe that's the best way to start this conversation. I've been doing a lot of videos, sort of setting videos on this channel lately that are hyper-specific to the original era of Dragonlance, i.e. the War of the Lance and the Age of Despair. It's just my preferred era. I actually prefer after the Blue Ladies' War, before the Summer of Chaos. That period of time, I think it's like 30-ish years or something like that, that is gold for me because you can do anything you want. And that's where, Dragonlance came out of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And it had a totality of this is what Dragonlance is from very beginning to very end in all of the DL modules from 1 all the way through to 16. And the last two, 15 and 16 modules are actually adventure anthologies that one of them is just like World of Krynn. And one of them is hyper-specific to adventures set after the War of the Lance, and the other one is just a series of adventures you can play whenever. But it is, like, this is my favorite era. So with that in mind, this novel is a love letter, quite literally, to that era of Dragonlance, the original Dragonlance era. Once second edition came out, it was no longer Gary Gygax's Dungeons and Dragons. A whole new team took it over. They completely sort of altered and shifted stuff around to try to make the game a little bit more user-friendly, and I don't know if they actually did or not. It's still pretty convoluted in second edition, just like it was in first edition, if I'm being fair. But they added in a whole bunch of stuff after the fact, where they went to focus on Taladas, and they had a whole bunch of comics and stories focused on stories as in adventures, focused on Taladas and stuff. And so it was a whole different direction. And when they realized that wasn't selling very well, they sort of went back and put out the Tales of the Lance box set to re-hyper-focus on Ansalon in Dragonlance, which is what Dragonlance was. That was the totality of it. So when you think of Dragonlance and the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons and its creation 40 years ago as framing, you're talking about from the beginning of the War of the Lance to the end of the Blue Ladies' War. That is what Dragonlance was. So it started with an upcoming war. It dealt with the main period block of war and then the aftermath of war. And so you could play in any of those eras of that time frame, but then it also referenced things like Huma and the Third Dragon War and the Age of Might. And, you sort of talked about these world-shattering events, which is why the Queen of Darkness was not around and why dragons were not around, and how shocking it was once they suddenly became prevalent, flying through the skies, burning forests and doing all sorts of nasty stuff. This era is what this trilogy is actually all about, because the authors have straight up said they're not paying attention to anything that anyone else has ever written in Dragonlance. And part of my huge complaints about the last novel, Dragons of Fate, was that they did straight up ignore some of the most popular Dragonlance novels, i.e. The Legend of Huma. Like, that's the entry point for a lot of people, and they completely ignored it. Even though it has comics and it has supplements and it has years and years of information and lore and legends all built up, they were just like, nah, we're not dealing with that anymore. So when I came into this novel initially, I was like, well, I have to steel myself because I know I'm going to be upset about the changes. But I wasn't, because I already experienced the dramatic changes. Everything that's in this novel is just from that point, you have to accept what's come before, in their opinion. So you have to accept Dragons of Destiny or Dragons of Deceit and Dragons of Fate as a reality. Moving forward and just accepting that and saying, okay, well, let's just finish the story. They hit it out of the park. I mean, I had tears in my eyes reading this novel. I was emotionally moved reading this novel, which I did not expect, like, at all. It referenced impactful moments from the core era of Dragonlance, i.e. the Chronicles, that still resonate with me to this day as a grown-ass man, eking up to the 50 year of my life. And I'm still emotionally moved by these, but it's like you have the Chronicles version of it right here. They're telling a story from right over here. You can't really see my hands in my video feed here. So from a side perspective, and they're extrapolating on moments. And I was laughing out loud throughout this novel because there's genuinely funny moments that I did not expect. I did not see coming. In all honesty, coming into this novel, when I first started reading the first chapter, in my mind, I was thinking, okay, well, this is just going to be a rehash of everything that's ever come before. And it's going to be a rehash of all the tropes and all the jokes and all the, character types. And yes, it has that. It has some of that, to be fair. But it landed. It hit really, really well and authentic. It didn't feel like a straight rerun. It felt like a refresh. It felt like it breathed new life into those moments. I can't wait till I can break stuff down specifically. And then there's moments in this where I'm like, well, wait a second. If we ended Dragons of Fate the way it ended, then how the hell is this in this story right now? why are these things happening, or this situation happening or set up, or these things existing right now in this story in Dragons of Eternity? And they give you enough information without actually having to spell it out that give you a justifiable acceptance of why things are the way they are. Because if it ended like in Dragons of Fate, then there was no cataclysm, because none of that would have happened. And there would be clerics everywhere, and the whole Age of Despair wouldn't have even been a thing, because it was the cataclysm that caused the Age of Despair. And you wouldn't have, all these different types of creatures and stuff, because there was no need for it. All of that's still there, except they have a reason. They just don't go into the details of that reason. They just present you with some basic information saying, this happened, which is why all this stuff is here. And for me, it actually worked. Like, I didn't need them to hold my hand and walk me through every single narrative decision. They just gave me a justifiable reason that I filled in my own head, alleviating them from having to either disappoint or frustrate readers, allowing the readers to fill in the blanks, which I think is very smart when it comes to Dragonlance fans, because we know we're obsessive and we can be really critical for no reason. I think that was a smart choice on their part to give us no, this is the reason. We're not going to go into details. If you really care that much, you can fill in the blanks. And I can't wait to do a spoiler discussion about this with a bunch of other people, because there are things that, as I was reading, I was like, this is BS. This would not be here. There's no reason why this. And then I stopped for a minute and I thought, okay, well, maybe it could if they did that. And then they sort of flesh out a couple of thoughts here and there throughout the course of this novel. And you're just like, all right, I get it. I understand. I'm with you. I'm tracking it. So I was pleasantly surprised with reading this thing. And of course, my computer is trying to shut down now. All right. Let's see. You got the book last night. That's awesome. Hey, Engine Joe, how you doing, man? You haven't read the book yet. I'm not going to spoil anything. I don't want to ruin anyone else's reading of it. Alternate timelines and paradigms are essential for enjoying these books. And that's the other part about this, is that again, like I had already mentioned, this is the last of a trilogy. So we have to have already accepted that the other two books exist. So that means that, okay, the timeline trope is still being used, and let's see where it goes. Let's see how they utilize the timeline trope. And I think they nailed the landing on this one. I really, really do. Ostensibly, without spoiling anything, they have the story split in two different timelines, dealing with two different situations that are connected. And you need to have the two things happening simultaneously, because if one's not happening, then the other is going to fail. And I can't really go into specifics about why or anything like that. But it really landed well. Now, here's a criticism about this that is going to be very vague, and it's not going to make any sense to anyone who hasn't read the book yet. It relies on nostalgia in order for one of those parts of the narrative to work. And it relies on you as a reader actually caring about these characters. And if you're a Dragonlance fan, you will, so it's not going to be a problem. But I can see a world where if this is the first entry point to Dragonlance for you, and you're just reading this trilogy as the very first thing ever, you're not going to give a damn about these characters. There's no reason for you to. You didn't have 40 years of obsession to build up what these characters meant. So you're just going to be like, well, why does that matter? Who cares if that's what's going on? And, you need to have that emotional connection for this book to really land. But if the authors did not include that nostalgic connection, this book would fall apart and be worthless. It would be utterly worthless. So I genuinely think this entire trilogy is really an excuse for the authors to return to familiar territory. And like, they tell an entertaining story, but the majority of this book is not with the people that it should be with. For example, the about, sort of blurb on the back of the book is, and this isn't a spoiler, this is on the back of the book and has been out there publicly for a while. And, an intrepid woman and her friends have inadvertently altered the future of the world. Now they must try to restore time to its thrilling conclusion of this New York Times bestselling Dragonlance series. When Destina Rosethorn and her companions were transported to a time centuries before their birth, in the days of the Third Dragon War, the Graygem of Gargath brought chaos to the battlefield and changed the course of history. Upon returning to the Inn of the Last Home, where their journey began, Destina's party discovered a world completely changed. The forces of evil now hold sway over their land. The river of time is rising, flowing inexorably toward the present day. Destina and her friends must make one last, desperate attempt to restore time's river to its proper channel. If they do not succeed, the altered past will sweep over the present until no trace of the old world remains. So this is all about Destina Rosethorn, right? Everything, the whole trilogy is supposed to be framed around the idea that this character, Destina Rosethorn, is the catalyst of everything. And yeah, from the first book, she was the catalyst. But I don't think anyone would argue that in the second novel, Dragons of Fate, that she was the focus, because she wasn't. And it's the same with this one. I would argue more so. She takes so much of a back seat that it is almost as if the authors listened to reviews of the first book and the second book, and they're like, maybe we should just dial back a little bit, because people don't seem to be resonating with this character very much. I don't think that's what's happened, but that's the feeling, the vibe I get from reading this, because she has such a tiny amount of presence in this novel. And when you sort of compare it to who does have a huge presence in this novel, you're like, oh, well, that's clearly why they wrote it. They wrote this for what they love, not for the actual story they set up. And then, in that sort of third act, they do this huge switch of focus on narrative, and it jumps right back to Destina. And you could just arguably say that Destina's whole story arc in this final novel could have been 2 chapters. That's it. And the rest of the 42 chapters are all about the other B story that's happening concurrently. And so you kind of have to wonder, do you really need Destina in this at all? Because this is starting to feel like none of this trilogy needed her in any way at all. They just used her as a jump-off point, and then they immediately started focusing on what they actually cared about. So what do you guys have to say thus far? Having not read the latest trilogy, can we say it's canon? You mean, does it rewrite what we know from the Chronicles and Legends? Okay. Without spoiling anything, I will say this does not fundamentally change anything from the core era of Dragonlance that I spoke to at the beginning of this show. It does not fundamentally change anything from Chronicles, Legends, anything during the War of the Lance or the Blue Ladies' War. That is all 100% still canon. And when you ask, is it considered canon? I think when it comes to Dragonlance, the last book written is the last canon. Whatever that last book happens to be. In this particular case, it's this book. And it's by the original authors. So, yeah, I would say this is definitely canon. And I think a lot of people are going to be wonderfully thrilled with the ending of this novel. And I think some people are going to be a little bit pissed at the ending of this novel. But based on everything that I've said thus far at the very beginning of this spoiler-free review, I'm thrilled with the ending of this novel. So take that for whatever you want, however you want to take it. But yeah, it's definitely canon, definitely. In my opinion. I mean, everyone's going to have, when it comes to Dragonlance, everyone has their different versions of what's canon and what's not canon, right? There's over 200 novels. And so you pick what novels you like, and that's your version of headcanon. And there's novels that you don't particularly like, and you're like, that's definitely not canon. For example, there are 2 underground races of elves in Dragonlance lore that are not drow. They're presented in 2 different novels. One of them was Michael Williams and Galen Benighted, and the other one was, what was it? It was, farts. I can't remember the name of the novel now. But anyway, They've never been mentioned in any supplement. They've never been mentioned in any other reference except for those 2 novels, and that's it. But they're there. So are they canon? I mean, they were written about. They're in a novel. This a Dragonlance novel. I mean, sure, why not? So that's kind of where, you as a reader have to decide, and you as a gamer have to decide what you connect with all the crazy, wild Dragonlance stuff that's out there. And you kind of have to choose what's canon and what's not canon, All right, so let's see. Bottom line, is this trilogy worth picking up? I would say, if you have been a fan for Dragonlance for a very long time, and you've read the Chronicles, you've read the Legends, you've read the Second Generation, you've read Dragons of Summer Flame, the Lost Chronicles, and you've gone into the Fifth Age, and you've gone into the War of the Souls, and you've gone Dark Disciple. If you've deep dived into Dragonlance novels, this is a definite must-read trilogy, if for no other reason, the ending. Because that's going to tell you whether or not you absolutely love it or you absolutely hate it. And you have to come to that on your own terms, because you can't have someone else tell you what's good and not. Everything's subjective in life. So I would say that if you have not read a bunch of the core Dragonlance novels of Chronicles and Legends, you probably don't need to read this at all. You could totally skip it and not miss anything, because where Chronicles and Legends ends, it's not too far away from this, how this ends. And so you're not gonna miss anything, and you're not gonna learn anything new. It's just, there's no reason for it, So no, don't read this if you don't care about Chronicles and Legends. If you do, this will give you new insight, new information. And I gotta say, this is probably the most, you know how Greek mythology, the gods are like involved in humans' lives, on an intimate daily basis. Dragonlance, when it came to the wartime, Fizzband was on the ground level, Queen of Darkness was on ground level, Mishakal was ground level. They all dealt with mortals intimately. But this novel, more than any other Dragonlance novel, the gods are present. And it's noticeably more involved. I can't really say why, but it's like out of it. It's shocking how much more involved they are. And if you like that sort of Greek mythology aspect of Dragonlance, then you're really going to dig it. If you don't, you're definitely not going to dig it at all. You're not going to like it at all. Maybe Destina was a forced character, and hence why it did the alternate paradigm thing. I don't know. And ultimately, the sort of bookend story of Destina Rosethorn, it worked for me. It's just that at the very beginning of the trilogy and now at the very end of the trilogy, I like how they bookended her narrative arc. But you didn't need it. None of it was necessary. I mean, arguably this entire novel is not necessary, but it's the author's flexing. Literally just flexing. They're like, no. This is our world. You dislike the first book. You like Destina as a character, and she got more rounded in the second book, despite being around less. Interesting to read this one. Yeah, Rhiannon, if you do feel that way, then you definitely should read this book, 100%. Because I think you're going to really like how her character ends up in it, And there's an obscure annotation in and I reviewed this and I mentioned it when I reviewed it, but in the Annotated Legends trilogy, there's an obscure little annotation where I think it was Tracy Hickman said, there is a story about a female, and I'm not giving anything away because I'm not giving any specifics or anything. I might be. Okay. I can't say it like that. Let me try to rephrase this. I have to be vague. There's an obscure annotated note by Tracy Hickman in Legends that if you know about it, it has no meaning to anything, full stop. But at the end of this novel, reflecting back on it, I'm thinking, oh, is that what they were talking about? Did they have this in their head as like a baby, like a seed in their head, like a creative seed, all this many years, and that one little annotated note is what spawned this entire trilogy. And if that's the case, well played, because holy shit, would that be a great excuse for doing this. And I can't talk about it without spoiling something, but it's, the only way you're ever going to make that connection is if you read those annotated notes. So if you didn't, you're not going to have any connection with anything at all. And I can't be more specific than that without spoiling anything. But I dug it. And maybe I'm just reading into it. But when I immediately read that part in the book, I was like, oh, I remember that annotation. Oh my gosh, is this the I gotta shut up. All right. What else? You're about to start reading this tonight. You came here to get the vibe, if it's as good as you hope. I liked the novel. I laughed. I teared up. And I left the novel feeling really good. So if you have tastes similar to mine, then you might as well. Nuka Bat, yeah, pick it up. Let me know your thoughts too when you get through it. You know, if you like just want to throw the book at my face and swear at me, that's okay too. Put it in the chat. You know, leave a comment like, you ruined my life. That's okay. I'll take the hit. I don't mind. If you didn't love when Fizzban sat in the white stone, may Lunitary strike you. Right. You got the first 2 on Kindle. You needed her for the base of the book. You're hoping this book is worth it. Hey, Skull Cowboy, thanks for tuning in. I think it's worth it. I definitely think it's worth it. Especially if you were sort of wishy-washy on the first 2 novels, this one I think would land for you. Because its focus is not on what people were complaining about. Myself included. And I like that. Is Raceland done well? Too well. I think Raceland is done too well. Look, let's be honest. The young Raceland from Dragonlance Chronicles was a dick. He was needlessly rude to everyone. He was just an ass. And there's no reason for him to be that way. He was just a dick. And we get that version of Raceland in this, where he's just a dick for no reason. And I'm sitting here reading it going, wait a second, isn't this the Raceland? Like, because in the original story, when they went back in like the first novel and the second novel, the version of Raceland that we got was the body of the companions meeting up after 5 years at the end of the last home at the beginning of Chronicles. But the mind was the Raceland after War of Souls. Like, he had already experienced everything. And so, and same with Sturm Brightblade. It was the young body, but it was the old soul that was put into it. I have no idea why they did that, but that's how it was presented. And so I don't know why the old soul version of Raceland, which was loving and apologetic to Caraman, and you know, he was at the end of the War of Souls. If you read it, then you know what I'm talking about. Or like, he was just a totally different, fully fledged, caring human being at that point. I don't know why he would go back to being a dick. But there's moments in this where he's just a straight up dick. I'm just like, oh, Raceland, you scamp, you. Oh, you just want to give him a noogie or something. Both Tracy and Margaret are very active right now at promoting Dragonlands. In that world, get them on your show. You'd love to see them interview here. Yeah, well, here's the thing, ST Lane. Thank you for tuning in. I have tried for years to get Tracy Hickman to come on this show, and he will not. He won't even respond to my emails, like, at all. So I don't know why. I don't know. I've interviewed Margaret about the first novel. Haven't been able to get back for a live interview for the second or third. So I don't see that happening. And I don't know why. I really don't know why. Because I love Dragonlance. I love them as authors. There's a decent sized audience that tunes into this show that loves them. I don't know why they wouldn't want to, but I just have no idea why. I'll continue trying, but it just don't work. And I have no social media presence, so maybe that's it. Maybe it's because I don't have like massive promotion and stuff, and they want to have a massive promotion. You know, I'm just YouTube, and you know that stifles it. But I don't like social media. I think it's toxic and it's worse than it needs to be. So I don't want to be involved in it. So it's just not my game. Let's see. You loved Magus and the non-dick mirror to Raceland, showing he could have been power without being a sociopath. Yeah, I did too. I thought first of all, Richard A. Nack's Magus was fantastic. He was like the Lando Calrissian version of Magus, and I loved every minute of him. I thought he was great. I really like Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman's version of Magus too, because it is different. It's very different, but it's cool. Like, I still think it's a great character. And I'm really looking forward to their new trilogy about Magus and Huma that they're writing for 2025. That's going to be coming out. So that's, or 2025 or 2026. I can't remember which one it was. But they are doing a trilogy about them. So I'm really looking forward to that because Magus is written really, really well in this. But he is a tragic character, you know? I mean, the fact is, and this isn't spoiling anything because it's in every single version of the tale between Huma and Magus. Magus dies. And he's like Huma's best friend. And the way he dies is different between Richard A. Nack's version and Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman's version. But he dies. And it's a pivotal moment in the character of Huma's life that he has to deal with the loss of one of his best friends. And as far as character development goes, it's an incredibly important story point. I know when I was in high school and strike that. I don't want to talk about it. It's immediately hitting me as emotional. Like, oh God, I don't want to cry on camera. Stuff like that needs to be dealt with. And I'm glad that they went there. Okay, let's see. Hoping this trilogy is proven to the publishers and WotC the Dragonlance novels are still viable because you're hoping to get even more stories beyond Huma and Magus trilogy. Same here. And look, here's the reality. I don't know if there's many more stories that Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman can tell after this and after the Huma and Magus trilogy. Because of the way this one ends, I can't say anything. I just can't say anything. I don't know if there's stories to tell. I'll just leave it at that. So I doubt we'll get any more. If we do, it'll be like tight character explorations, not world development things. And they could do whatever the hell they want because, you know, people will buy the books. So sure they could. I just can't imagine what they would do. Let's see what else. Don't feel bad. None of them would touch your show ever. Oh, I don't feel bad about it. It's just, I just don't understand it is all. What if you like sociopaths? Well, then Raceland's your guy. There's nothing wrong with that, I guess. Let's make Ansalon great again. If you can see these novels in the mindset of the ever-changing AD&D game, it's easier to digest. Yeah, I think so too. Look, Dragonlance has been nothing but an evolution. And each author comes in and evolves it in a different way. Sometimes it goes way off the beaten path of what people expected Dragonlance to be, i.e. the Fifth Age. And then when it's tried to be navigated back on track, it doesn't always stick the landing. And that's what Dragonlance has always been, you know? I mean, it changed from first edition to second edition, from second edition to saga system, from saga system to third edition, from third edition to fifth edition. It has always been an evolution of a IP, of a campaign setting. And everyone is justified in their opinions on what time frame they love the most because it only matters to them, and it should only matter to them. It's their own personal resonance with an IP, and they're, you know, you have every right to feel however you want to feel about it. And personally, for me, I happen to like this AD&D era, but no one else has to. I don't care. If your favorite is War of Souls, or if your favorite is the Fifth Age before War of Souls with the Dragon High Lords, or the Dragon Overlords, that's great. That's awesome. I enjoy those as well, just not as much as this era. And so that's okay. So are the Chronicles still your favorite, or what would you consider peak Dragonlance? Chronicles and Legends is peak Dragonlance for me. Everything after, even including Summer Flame, from second generation I dug. Summer Flame on, including Summer Flame, I think is not peak Dragonlance for me. They never sold as well as they did before that. They never did as well in the gaming products as they did before that. It's just never had that sort of fever pitch obsession as they did in AD&D. They just never have. And probably because D&D sort of spiraled and went in, weird places and different ownerships and stuff. And everyone was floundering, trying to milk as much money out of it as they could. But the IP itself has always been peak Chronicles of Legends and Lost Chronicles, because that's still Chronicles. Let's see. Dragonlance has always been its own game to you, only somewhat part of AD&D's or AD&S. Yeah, I mean, it does feel like it's its own beast, right? Like, for sure. I don't know. I mean, it just depends on when you came into D&D or when you came into Dragonlance and how you came into it. What system, what novel, what you resonated with and stuff. The reality is if you never read Chronicles or Legends or the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons era of gaming products, this trilogy is not going to make any sense, because it's all about that era, like 100% totally, because that's what Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman cut their teeth on. That's how they became famous. That's where they made their most money. That's where they became popular. And so they went right back to that well. And let me tell you, this novel, we were thrown in the well 100% in some very interesting ways. Nothing wrong with that, Skull Cowboy. Nothing wrong with that. Here's how you look at it all. You got to see some dear friends. Hey, Ryan, thanks for tuning in. You truly missed. Even if the trilogy isn't the best, it's getting the brand out there again, and hopefully some new blood picks up Chronicles. 100%. Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. This will not land for everyone, and certainly not the ending will not land for everyone. But it does keep the IP out there. It does keep it in the forefront of people's minds. And let's be honest, if it's not out there, then people are not going to want to make a movie out of it or make a series out of it or pay any mind to it or put out other materials. The fact that Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman have an ongoing novel plan tells you that Dragonlance will be around for years to come. And whether or not game products are made by Wizards of the Coast, to their stupidity, doesn't matter. Because as long as the novels are there, it's inspiring readers, and maybe they're going to want to try the game, whatever version of the game they want to try. And then they're going to fall in love with the world, of engaging with the world of Krynn and experiencing these different stories with their own characters and making their own marks on the Dragonlance saga as a whole. And I can't tell you, it's so much more immersive, in my personal opinion, than anything that Tolkien ever did. It's so much more immersive than any other D&D campaign. Like, it's got so much lore and so much history, like from time scale, that you can literally go to any point in time and tell any type of story you want, and it's going to be dramatically different than another time of story and in the same exact type of, another time frame and the same exact story, because the world is dramatically different. So you have to sort of adjust, and that's the strength of it. It's just so great, and you're never going to get tired of gaming in Dragonlance. I never have in the 30 some odd years that I've been gaming in it, because you can literally go to any era and tell any type of a story, and it's still Dragonlance, It's still great. There are some moments in this novel that I was reading, I was like, ugh, that's a little cheese. But like, when I reflect back on the original trilogy of Chronicles, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty cheesy too. The themes of Dragonlance are pretty cheese. They're pretty black and white, kids story type stuff. And so, yeah, it's about love overcoming evil, and it's about love triumphing over all and good triumphing over evil and maintaining a balance. And it was a little bit heavy-handed in like one particular part in this story where I was just like, it was a little too heavy-handed for me. And I'm a romance guy, and it still was too much for me. So I don't know. You saw the stream. The book is out already. Yeah, it came out today. You should this isn't spoilers, so it's okay if you tune in. Thanks for tuning in, by the way, Bears fan Goomba. All right, so you like the modern game adaptations? You like the ancient AD&D SSI titles? Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's fine. No problem. I will say I was writing next week's episode, which is Villains of the War of the Lance, because this week's was Heroes of the War of the Lance. And I focused on the war aspect of the original saga and how it's totally vacant from any of the reimaginings of the original DragonLance Saga modules from AD&D, because they don't include any of the like wargaming aspects of it, which is frustrating because that's what DragonLance is. And so I have to tip my hat to WotC and 5th edition, because at least they have Warriors of Krynn as a wargame element to it. At least they addressed the fact that it is a war game in addition to a narrative role-playing game. And that's exactly what the original DragonLance modules did. You know, from DL6 on, there were battle system elements for wargaming in it because it's all about war. And if you're not going to play that wargame aspect of it, that's fine. You can still have fun, but it's just not quite DragonLance in that case. It's only a piece of it, you know? Hey, Horrific, how you doing, man? Is this the new trilogy that's come out? This is the last book of the new trilogy. Yes. The final book in that trilogy. All right, so that's kind of it. I can't really go into anything else because it would be full spoilers at that point. So next week, I'm going to give you my full spoiler review of Dragons of Eternity. But for now, I have to say I was pleasantly surprised. Again, I'm going to reiterate, I laughed out loud. I had tears in my eyes. And I'm happy that this is the direction that they ended this on. I'm happy that they ended it on this direction. It felt good for me as a fan, and I enjoyed it more than arguably the first two books, for sure. Yeah, not even arguably, like 100% I enjoyed this novel the most. So take that with a grain of salt. I hope you guys get out there, pick up the book, read it, and remember, I have the 40th anniversary celebration. I'm going to be launching it all November 1st to coincide with the release of Dragons of Autumn Twilight 40 years ago. So put in your submissions, get a piece of art, get a soundbite, get a little note, a writing about how Dragonlance has influenced you, put a video together, shoot it over to me at info@dlsaga.com, and let's celebrate Dragonlance's 40 years together. That's going to do it for this spoiler-free review of Dragons of Eternity by Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. What did you think of the end of the trilogy? Do you think any new novels will be written after this series? And finally, did you like how Taz and Destina ended up? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this. I'm parched. I want to take a sip, but I also want to finish this. Take a moment, remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell, get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. I hope you'll join in the celebration. Thank you for watching. This has been Adam with Dragonlance Saga, and until next time, Slanchavar.